Welcome to the Above and Beyond Recovery Podcast, where we explore recovery and its relationship to faith, family, work, community, and health.
Hello, I'm Amber Didden, today's host of the Above and Beyond Recovery Podcast. On today's episode, we'll be learning more about the recovery experience from someone who's been there. Our guest today is Shannon. As many of you know, this podcast is produced by Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge, and Shannon is a student in our program. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Amber.
So, Shannon, I don't know anything about your story. I've seen you around for a couple of months, but I'd love to just start with hearing a little bit about where you grew up and where you came from, and tell me about yourself.
All right, so I am 37 years old. I grew up in Collingdale, Pennsylvania. Collingdale's in Delaware County. It's right outside of Philly. My mom was a single mom, raising two girls, sending us to Catholic school, working really hard. And I was a nerd growing up. I threw myself into school, so I loved school, and I just loved being a part of a community. I had a really tight-knit group of girlfriends who are still my friends today, and I had a good childhood. I really can't complain. My mom did the best she could with what she had.
What were your favorite subjects when you were in school?
My favorite subject was definitely English. When I was little, vocabulary. I liked doing spelling bees and stuff like that. Not a fan of math whatsoever or history, but loved writing. I'm a huge writer, so yeah, language arts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not a math person either, so I totally identify with
Yeah.
that. Did you have a sense when you were a kid kind of like where you wanted to go with your life?
I did. When I was little, I wanted to be a teacher. That was my goal. I used to set up things in my room, and I would have my chalkboard, and I would like teach my imaginary students. So that's what I wanted to do. And after high school, I actually went to college for elementary education, but I feel like God had different plans for me.
So when did you kind of get a sense that things were changing in your life?
Well, I got pregnant at 17, and I had my son. I knew things were going to be different from that day forward, but my goals and my dreams became even bigger, if that makes sense, because I wanted to give him the best life possible. So I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. So I just knew the trajectory of my life was going down a different path.
So what was your situation when you had your son? Were you still living with your mom?
I was living with my mom. I was a junior in high school. I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and my mom was extremely supportive of me. I don't know where I would be without her. My family was a huge support, and at that time, looking back, I was a child, but in my mind, I was very mature for my age, and I just became even more mature and more focused on what I wanted to do with my life.
So you had your son at 17, and then you started in college.
Yes, I graduated high school. I went to Penn State Brandywine. It was a good experience for me and my son. He went with me everywhere I went, but things kind of took a little bit of a turn my fourth year in college. My mom needed help at home, and I decided I would take a break and come back, and I got a full-time job to help her out with the bills and things like that. And I was around 22 years old then, and I had never tried any hard drugs or anything of that nature, and that's where my addiction took off.
So had you had any kind of experience with drugs or alcohol at all before that point?
I definitely experienced drinking. I liked to drink in high school, but after having my son, the drinking was just on the weekends or whenever I could go out, but I always took it to the extreme. So I did have a problem with alcohol, but just seeing people I loved and other situations of addiction, I had swore to myself that I would not try a narcotic, but that just didn't turn out to be the case.
Did it start socially, or how did it get started?
So it started, I was working at Harrah's Casino, and I was working graveyard shifts. So I was working 11 at night to 7 in the morning while raising my son and just trying to keep us afloat. at this time we had moved out of my mother's house and I had my own place. So I just needed that energy. I was always looking for something to fill this void that I've had inside of myself my whole life. And with working the casino, I had actually ran into a stranger who was there, and he had asked me if I knew anyone who would like to buy Percocets. And I was so naive and asked, well, what would that do? And he said, it'll give you energy. So I thought, okay, here's my answer. And it was just all downhill from there.
Did you notice the shift downhill after the first time you tried it, or was it kind of like a progression?
It was definitely quicker than I had thought. I was taking them, I guess, for probably 2 or 3 months, and I realized how much money I was spending, and I decided I was going to stop. And when I did that, I became very ill because I was taking a lot. And when I was told I was going through withdrawal, I automatically went to what's the next thing higher than this, which was heroin. And I tried heroin after 3 months of taking the Percocets, and the downhill progression was very fast for me, very fast.
When you started feeling kind of like uncertain about where you were with the Percocets, did it occur to you to reach out for help, or
No.
why not?
I feel like at that point in time, I thought I could have it under control, which I know is crazy thinking, but I know for me, like being an addict or, being in addiction, your way of thinking is not right at all. And I just thought if I could just get past this sickness, then maybe I'll bring it back. So yeah, reaching out for help was never a thought in my mind then.
Did you have other people in your life, like friends that were also using, or how
Yes.
did you like learn how?
Right. So growing up, I was the girl who didn't do that stuff. So like all my friends were trying ecstasy or cocaine or Xanax, and I always stayed away from it. And then I started hearing like my close, that tight-knit group of friends I talked about, they were using heroin, and I never understood why. So a part of me had that like curiosity in me to why are they doing this? And yeah, it was just available.
So after you started using, tell me a little bit about what that was like what started happening in your life and with your relationships, and
Okay.
was your mom aware of things, or?
Okay, so my mom was not aware of things. In the beginning, I did a good job of hiding it. I kept it behind closed doors. If my mom did have like an inkling that something was going on, I manipulated her, and I used all the tactics that we use to keep that boundary up because I was fearful. I didn't want, my son to be taken away, and I didn't want all these things to happen. I lived in a fantasy, honestly. I thought that it was just going to work out. It's crazy thinking, but yeah, my mom was not aware, but the downhill progression for me was I started to not want to go to work anymore. I would get sick very fast. My money was going, my bills weren't getting paid. I was late to dropping my son off to school, like all these signs that you see. But like the most important thing for me was I was just losing myself. I had lost myself. I had become an empty shell of a person. And I thought that life was just how I was going to live my life. And it's not really living, it's just existing. So it was downhill for me very, very fast.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that sense of losing yourself?
Yes.
Like, what pieces of yourself did you feel like you were losing, and were you conscious of that happening, or was it just kind of like you woke up one day and you were like, I don't recognize?
So I feel like I was conscious. I tried to ignore it. I lost my sense of purpose, like how I had dreams and hopes and visions of my future. I had lost that. The only thing I could see in front of me was that day. The getting, the using, the finding ways and means. I couldn't see past what was in front of me, and I lost the serenity that I had once had with God, because Jesus has always been a part of my life. Not like he is now, but I did feel close to him, but there was that void that I didn't choose to fill him with. I chose to fill other things. And so I lost just any drive, I guess, that I had to be a mom, to be a daughter, to just want to live life. I just lost that. And then one day I looked in the mirror because I tried to avoid that for so long. And I did not, it was like an out-of-body, I did not recognize myself at all.
Was that a wake-up call for you?
Yes, but at the same time, it drove me deeper. It gave me, like, my disease and the enemy they were telling me, there's no coming back from this. Like, it's just too much work. Like, you just have to stay here. And I believed it. I believed it for a while.
So where was the turning point for you?
So in the apartment that I had with my son, I had ended up giving away all of our stuff except for his room. And I was sitting in my living room on crates. And my TVs were gone, and no cable, no furniture. And I was going to court for not paying my rent. So I had lost my apartment and our car, and we were moving back in with my mom. And my mom and my sister had like a kind of an intervention thing for me, that if I didn't go and get help, that there would be some serious consequences, like losing custody of my son. So that was the big turning point for me. That was in 2009.
So what was going through your head in that meeting with your family?
I was completely panicked, and the only thing that I could think of was, how can I get high one more time? Or how can I feel better one more time before I do this? Maybe I should just tell them what they want to hear so they can get off my back. And at that point in time, I knew deep down that I didn't want to stop, but I felt so guilty for thinking that way because my son was right there. So I kind of went for them, for my family.
So you decided to go to treatment?
I went to treatment in 2009. I stayed there for, I think, 40 days. But I compared myself to everybody else. I thought I was different because I wasn't, quote, that bad. There were women in there that had been to prison, had their kids taken from them, and I'm like, those things have never happened to me, or they've overdosed, and I was hearing other people talk about other drugs that they've tried. And for me at that time, I had only done Percocets and heroin. So my great thinking was, let me just go try everything and then I'll get help. And that is just so sick. And that's exactly what I did. And all those I nevers that I heard those women talking about happened to me. So I learned the hard way. I definitely learned the hard way on that one.
So you entered and left treatment in 2009?
Yes.
And then did you seek treatment any time after that?
So there was, after that, I had moved in with my aunt. My aunt is a huge part of my story. She was like my second mom. And sorry, I'm getting emotional. She just passed away last month, so yeah. But I know she's here with me today, but she was like my biggest support, and I was living with her, and I was using, and I knew I didn't want to keep using. There was something in me, like it was just that battle going on constantly. Like, I don't want to live this way, but I don't want to stop getting high. I wanted to die, but I didn't want to die because if I'm dead, I can't get high anymore. It was like this crazy, insane insanity thinking that I struggled with. So I did try, I went into another treatment center. I think it was in August of 2010. I ended up using in that treatment center, and I was thrown out. And I had ended up, I became so desperate that I was stealing. I ended up stealing my aunt's debit card, and I was taking money out of that for a long time to support my habit. And I was caught eventually, and the detectives came to our house where me and my aunt lived, and they asked if I had a problem. And I said obviously, because by this point I think I was like 110 pounds soaking wet. Just it was apparent. There was no more hiding it anymore. And I told them I had a problem and I needed help. And they said this was on a Friday. And they said if I waited till Monday to get into a treatment center, that they were going to help me. And I didn't leave the house and they would drop the charges. So that weekend was a living nightmare for me because I wrestled with, I was sick. I was dope sick. But I wanted to get help and I couldn't leave the house. Well, Monday came and I ended up taking a pair of my aunt's earrings to a pawn shop. And I walked in and the same detectives that were at my house on Friday were in the pawn shop. And my thinking was, they don't know these aren't mine, so I'm just gonna pawn them. I took a bus to go cop for one bag, and I'll never forget sitting there. It was pouring rain, and I was sitting out on the street waiting for him to bring me one bag, and I just remember asking God, I don't want to do this anymore. I was so hopeless at that point, and I didn't know who else to talk to or where to turn, so I cried out to God, and on my way home, the detectives arrested me. So I was sent to jail, and that was in September of 2010.
How long were you there?
I was there for a little over a month, but that's long enough for me. One day is long enough for me. And I was sent to an all-women and children's facility in Ashland, Pennsylvania. And after that, I was clean for almost 9 years.
Did you feel like your relationship with God grew after that period?
Yes, for sure. I definitely had that connection with him. My son would always say, Mom, you're so spiritual. I was just very zen, and I meditated and I prayed all the time, and I knew that God was with me. Yeah, at some point I lost focus of that. And after you lose focus of God and of your relationship with him, everything else seems to just fall apart.
The drift.
Yes. Like when both my feet aren't on good spiritual ground, it's just everything starts to crumble.
So 2010 to 2019.
Yes.
So in 2019, how old was your son?
16.
He was 16.
He was 16
Okay.
when I relapsed, yes.
Okay, so I have a family member who's in recovery.
Okay.
And we've been through relapses before. So I know that side of the story.
Yes.
And you can kind of sense when things, like you said, kind of start to get shaky, when both feet aren't on solid ground. So I've seen it from that perspective. But help me understand and give me some more color to like, what does that feel like to be on the other side? And I know there's got to be some period of wrestling, right?
Yes.
Where you don't want to, but you're starting to feel it. Can you help me understand, like, what was that period of time like for you?
Definitely at that point in my life, there were a series of losses that I had experienced. My father had passed away, and me and my son had lost our house due to COVID. There was just a lot of things that I thought I could handle on my own, and it sounds silly because from experience and being in recovery, I know that that's not how you're supposed to live your life. You're supposed to live with, your support group and let other people know where you are. But I can be very prideful and not ask for help, and that's where I fell short. I just couldn't handle it on my own anymore. But my thinking was I could, so I just tried to plow through everything. I started missing my meetings. I started to lack in my prayer life. And at that time, service was a big thing for me in recovery. Helping another addict or just being of service to God. And I started thinking, I don't have time for this anymore. And slowly but surely, everything started to lack for me. And I had went to the doctor for some health issues I had, and he made a suggestion to get on Klonopin. So I did what I thought was right. I called my sponsor and I told her, and we talked about it, and I heard what I wanted to hear, that, I was on good, solid ground, but I knew in my heart that I wasn't. I just wanted to hear that, so I had the green light to take the medication, and that just started the whole relapse for me. I mean, I emotionally relapsed before I actually picked up.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say. It started way before I actually put a drug in my hand.
Walk me through how the medication kind of prompted you or changed or made it easier for you to go back to using.
People offered me, hey, I'll hold it for you, and I'll give it to you when you need to take it. And no, I'm good. That's like the theme of my life. I'm fine. Everyone's fine. We're all fine. And so I told myself, I tested myself. And I said, I can do this on my own. And after probably a couple weeks of taking it as prescribed, I thought, okay, I won't take it at nighttime. And I'll save that one for the next morning, and I can double up the next morning. I thought, well, the doctor prescribed it, so it's okay. But that secret was keeping me sicker than I thought.
How long were you misusing the prescription?
I would say for about 4 or 5 months. And then other drugs came into play.
How long was that period of time that you started using the other drugs?
Like before I first got clean, I think it was like 2 years of using. And then same with this relapse, it was about 2 years. I liked the opiates, the downer feeling. And when I relapsed, I thought if I go to uppers, then I'll be okay, which is just absolutely insane.
It's kind of, I mean, don't take this the wrong way,
Yeah.
but it's kind of fascinating how our brains are so good at justifying.
Yes.
Like whether it's drugs or just anything else in our life that's not good for us.
Right.
We are so good at like, well, I could do this because I didn't do that. Or if I do this, then I could do that. You know, it's just wild how our brains work.
It is very wild.
Yeah.
So, and that's how, I was using like that for a while, but it always takes you right back to where you started. It actually takes you worse off to where you started.
So your son's 16 at this time. How much of it was he aware of? Like, how much did he know about before? And was he starting to sense things? How was your relationship?
Our relationship was beginning to be non-existent, honestly, because my son grew up knowing his mom clean and sober and being in recovery and seeing me do all these things in the rooms and how spiritual I was. So I feel like he noticed the difference in me right away because I am his mom. And when we lost our home, we had moved in with his father and his wife, and me and his father started using together as well. So my son went to my mom, back to my mom. So we weren't living together anymore. And I used that as another excuse to just keep getting high. And I was disappointed in myself. I was very regretful that I had relapsed, obviously, because I had worked so hard to build my life, to build our life into what it was. And I literally gave it away. It wasn't taken from me. Like I freely gave everything I worked for away. I had tried methamphetamines for the first time, and that took me to places I would never want anyone to go. And I thought after, I thought I had experience with knowing what I was using. I thought I was using heroin again, but it turns out I was using fentanyl. And that was really scary for me because I had tried to get clean at my aunt's house, and it was just so violent, and I didn't understand why. And I found out it was fentanyl. So not only was my physical appearance just like The Walking Dead, it was behind my eyes was just empty. Like just completely empty. I can't explain the feeling. It's just that light inside of you that you had is just, it's not dimmed out. It's just gone. So I had another moment in the mirror. Again, that battle came up because God allowed me to have that time in recovery. So I knew the other side. And I didn't want to be where I was, but I didn't know how to get out of it anymore. Like I knew I could call for help and things like that, but I just thought that was it for me.
So how did you get help?
So my son called Teen Challenge.
Really?
Yeah, my son
Oh my gosh.
called Teen Challenge. We have like a friend of the family who actually went through this program here in Rearsburg, and he's still clean today. And I knew about Teen Challenge, but I had such a different view of what it would be, and I had automatically said no to it before. And this time I was desperate. I thank God for like that moment of desperation, because I feel like without that I wouldn't be here. And my
what
son,
a perspective. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to
no,
stop
it's
you, but
okay.
a perspective to stop and thank God for the difficulty.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's what brought you
Yes.
to where you are. Wow.
Yeah. I thank God for him. I thank him for that every day, because I can literally, physically feel that moment of just complete hopelessness. And that's what got me to think, okay, I'll try something, because I just didn't want to be there anymore. So he called Teen Challenge, and he called me, and he got me in contact with Barb, who I love dearly. And she called me every day. And the fourth day, I think, Barb called me, and she's like, our transportation's a little messed up again. Can you wait another day? And the past 3 days I had said, yeah, but this day something was different. I felt like if I didn't move right then and there, I was going to die, or I was going to end up in prison. And I just felt that in the bones of my body. And I felt like God was like telling me, figure this out. So I said to her, well, what if I just get there? Can you just make sure I have a bed, please? And she said, yeah. And I said, I'm taking an Uber. So I Ubered to treatment. Like right after I hung up, I ordered an Uber. And I was out the door within like 7 minutes, I think. Yeah.
So the thing that I have to rewind just a minute, because I have 2 boys.
Okay.
My oldest is 11.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing like a boy's love
for his mom. Yeah.
So what was that like when your son said, like, Mom, I called Teen Challenge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did that conversation go?
That was emotional for me, because it's always been me and him. And I was just so proud of him. And I felt so blessed that he had not given up on me. And I just knew because his birthday was January 15th, and I got here on the 10th. So I thought, I don't want to miss a birthday. So if I am going to miss it, I might as well be in treatment. So he was like my huge motivation.
And how's it been since you've been in the program with your son? Are you building a relationship with him?
Oh, yes. It's amazing. It's great. My son actually was saved before I was saved.
Really?
Yeah, so that's really a cool dynamic on his father's side of the family. They, they're Christians, and they have been such a huge influence on him. So when we talk, like last night, I told him that I was doing this today. And he's like, well, are you still, in your word? And I'm like, yeah, well, where are you at? And it's just completely different. It's better than it ever was before. We've always been really close, but we have Jesus in the middle of it now. So it's really cool. Yeah,
So cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I bet he's just like so proud of you.
He is. And that's like my favorite thing to see with him is when, like, if we walk into a room or when he's with me, he's just proud that I'm his mom, and I'm proud that he's my son. So yeah.
So where are you at in your program right now?
Okay, so I've been here for 7 months, almost 8 months. I have learned a lot. I love to help other women. I just want to impact them, especially when it comes to whether they're deciding to stay or not, because I know that was huge for me. I wanted to leave every day and detox, but I didn't, thank God. The women, when I was in short term, the women in long term really welcomed me, and that made a huge difference. So helping others is huge for me, and I just want to be the light for people. I just want them to see that anything is possible, especially with God. And, the staff here is great too. I want to be like them. So I know like what I want to do. I feel like God is pushing me in a certain direction. And for the first time in my life, I'm just letting him take the lead, which is really cool. And I don't know. I'm just extremely grateful and thankful where I'm at right now. Because if you would have told me that I would be this happy and I'd be sitting here talking to you about this, and I would have been like, no way. God has completely restored myself and my life and my son's life, and I know that it's not the end. And that's like what I really want to get across to people. I had this vision of what I thought my life should be like. And I just have this feeling inside of myself that whatever I'm dreaming about or whatever you guys are dreaming about, whoever's listening, like it's so much bigger. It's going to be so much bigger and so much better that you can even imagine or even think. And that gives me so much hope, and that just keeps pushing me forward. Because don't get me wrong, there's some hard things you have to deal with, and but God gave me this opportunity to work on myself for this year and to work on my relationship with him. So, yeah.
Do you have any kind of picture or idea of where the future is headed for you?
I do a little bit, but I don't, like someone once told me, I forget who told me this, but they were like, if you picture yourself, okay, so I want to intern and then I want to work here. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go, but I don't want to limit myself to one thing because I know God has huge plans, not just for me, but for everybody. So I just want to be a part of this work community and help other women, and just, yeah, that's really as far as my mind takes me, really. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
Thanks.
Is there anything, as we kind of come to a close, is there anything that if you could tell people listening about kind of the journey that you've been on, like what is something you feel like a lot of people miss about struggling with addiction?
For me, and I can only speak for myself, but struggling with addiction, we're always, like I said, we're always picking things to try and, okay, well, if I lose this much weight, I'll feel better about myself. Or if I get into a relationship, I'll feel better about myself. If I have the cars, the house, the money, I'll feel better about myself. All these things that we reach out for and think that they're going to fill us up with, they're not going to. They always let us down. And God will never let you down. Like, my life verse is be still and know that I am God. And it sounds like the simplest verse, but I feel like it's the hardest one to do because I suffer from the I gotta goes. Like, I'll be sitting here and I'll be thinking of where I have to be and stuff like that. And God has showed me if I just sit still and I just be in the moment and I just know that everything He's doing is working for my good, like, everything's going to turn out okay. So just sit still and trust in Him.
And also, when we have those moments with God, He aligns the things that we want in our life to the things that He wants for us. And so we go into those conversations with God sometimes thinking okay, God, this is what I need. And He's like, actually, you need me. And once you're in communion with me, then we're going to work on the other things. And then you're like, wow, you brought me to this place that I never expected to be. And it's exactly where
you're like, why didn't I do this before?
Right.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. So,
well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. And it just brings me so much hope and encourages me so much because I've never been where you're sitting, but I've seen people in these positions, and I know there's so many people listening that have a family member or a mom or a sister or a coworker or someone at their church that's struggling, and sometimes it's hard to ask the kind of questions that I've asked you today, but you've given so much life and information to that, and I really appreciate it. If there's anybody that is in a position where they're struggling and they're maybe at that kind of decision point where they're wrestling with it, maybe they're even contemplating a relapse or they're in that moment, what would you have to say to them?
Jesus is the answer. And I honestly never thought I would say that in my life. Like, I've had God in my life and I've had a relationship with Him, but I thought that I could stay clean and do things with Him on the back burner or with Him kind of there in the background. And I just want to tell you guys, just put Him first. I know it sounds cliche, but it's the truth for me. Like, I just want to, when I was in recovery, I would go speak at meetings or conventions and things like that, and I would share of how the program saved my life, but those programs are God-given programs. Like, God saved my life, and I just want to tell them that there is hope, and no matter what, just hold on. And if you are contemplating picking up, don't do it, please. Just take it from me, don't do it. Call somebody. I know the phone can feel like 1,000 pounds, but pick up the phone or just shout out to God. And if you're thinking if you need help or not, please go get help because you do, and you're worth it, and God has huge plans for you. So just hold on.
Before we close the show, we like to talk about the habits that we're making this week that help us find wholeness in our lives. So Shannon, what's your wholeness habit this week?
So this week, my wholeness habit is listening to worship music in the morning when I wake up. It helps to set the tone for my day, and it just reminds me of all the things God has done in my life up to this point. So,
what's your favorite worship artist?
Hillsong worship is my favorite, yes.
Shannon and I have been attending church together, and on Sunday they sang a song that I'd never heard before, that song called Song for His Presence.
Yes, I never heard that
one
either.
And as soon as we started singing it, something about those first lyrics got me, and I opened my phone and saved the song, and it's been on repeat this entire week.
That's
love
awesome.
that song. It's so
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah, that's a good habit to have. My habit this week is I've been trying to drink a smoothie every morning. And my problem was that I was putting too many things in the smoothie. So I started off with some spinach and an apple and a banana and some seeds and some protein powder. And it was way too much.
Did that actually taste okay?
It didn't taste great. And I didn't feel great after drinking it in the morning. So I've kind of narrowed it down. So now I just do one fruit, some protein, and maybe some ice and some almond milk. But it's a good way to start the day and feels good. So
awesome.
Yeah. All right, that's it for this week. Shannon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amber, so much for having me. And I just really hope that the listeners out there received some hope from my message, and just never give up.
I'm sure they will definitely receive that. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
Yes. And thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave us a comment or email us with a question at AboveBeyond@paatc.org. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for joining us. The Above and Beyond Recovery podcast is a production of Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge. If you or a loved one needs help with addiction, call us now at 844-888-8085 or find us online at paatc.org. That information is also in our show notes. Join us next time as we continue the conversation.